My name is Joshua Escobar, and today I'll be talking to you about my final project, which is another ethical dilemma. Here, I got my mom to explain to me an ethical dilemma that she actually dealt with at work recently, actually. So it was pretty fresh in her brain, the whole situation. And I was able to walk her through the eight-step model and find out if her decision would have been different based on this eight-step model. So first, I'll explain to you the ethical dilemma. To give you a little background, my mom is a accountant for this company. It's a construction company, so she runs all the financials, inputs, outputs, all the financials. She's the accountant for the company, so she deals with that. So being the controller for the general contractor, obviously she's in charge of all this. So during COVID, the company did struggle, and obviously the less money you make, the less taxes that you have to pay. So after COVID in 2021, the company was successful and did make a good amount of money. So when the tax preparations began, the owner went to my mom and insisted that she change the numbers so that his tax liability was less. And obviously this results in less owed to the government and to the IRS. So he was trying to push my mom, who is the accountant, to cook the books a little bit so that the numbers obviously show that he doesn't have to pay as much taxes, which obviously would result in more money for the company, which is him. So the ethical dilemma or moral dilemma here is, does she listen to her boss and do as he says because she doesn't want to get in trouble with her boss? Or does she do the ethically moral decision, which would be to not change any numbers and report the actual numbers to the IRS, which obviously would be the moral decision. Personally, for me, I'm sure maybe other people would decide otherwise, but for me, I think that is the morally ethical decision. So we're going to see in this scenario what my mom decided, what was going through her head, and then we're going to walk you through this eight-step model to see if her decision would have been different based off this eight-step model. So based on this, I kind of went through this eight-step model and kind of asked her some questions just to get a feel for who were the stakeholders, where was her head when this was going on, and what possibly could have been different if she went through this eight-step model. So based on this, I asked her who makes money based on these choices, and we decided that this overall, the person who's making the money would be the owner, because he'd be benefiting by not paying taxes, obviously more money for him. And when it came to the values that were in conflict and what was the moral dilemma, my mom honestly said that the overall value that was in conflict for her was the honesty. And obviously her being the accountant, this could be something that's huge, because if she's reporting numbers that aren't factual, this could obviously haunt her and the company in the long run. So she definitely has to make a moral decision on whether she's going to listen to her boss or go with her gut feeling, or the moral decision, which is not reporting the fake numbers and putting the real numbers. So like I said, honesty is the huge value here, as she's deciding if she's going to lie or tell the truth. And a huge dilemma for her was that her career technically is, or it is, in jeopardy, as she's lying for the tax reduction only for 1 year too. So she was really putting her career on the line if she was going to lie in this situation. When it came to the stakeholders, we decided who the stakeholders were. And obviously the owner is affected by it tremendously, as no matter what, he's going to be paying either more taxes, which is the right amount of taxes, or he would be paying less taxes based on the decision that my mom made. Another stakeholder in this decision was my mom, as no matter what the decision she made, she was going to be facing consequences. Whether that be she lied, she was going to be facing consequences in the future, with possibly the IRS coming back for her and getting her for tax fraud. And then if she didn't do this and doesn't listen to her boss, she would be facing consequences with her boss for not listening to him. So no matter what decision she was going to make, she was going to be in a predicament. Obviously, the morally ethical decision was going to have consequences that put her in a situation that was uncomfortable with her boss. But I definitely think this was the better decision to make from the two. When you think about the consequences with everyone involved, she obviously knew that there were going to be consequences no matter what for her. It was just came down to which consequences she was going to be willing to really deal with, and which ones were consequences that came with making the morally ethical decision. Um, my mom always said that when this was like happening and occurring, she kind of had an idea which consequences were going to be more likely to occur, and those obviously were the ones that came with putting the actual numbers. So she kind of had the idea that when she made this decision, she was probably going to have the consequences that came with dealing with her boss for not listening to him. So she knew that these were going to occur just because her ethical decision really was never going to change or waver. When it came to the consequences that were beneficial, um, she knew that if she cooked the books, that the consequences for her and for the company weren't going to be, they weren't going to be great, as she was going to have to deal with the IRS possibly coming for her and her job and her title after, or she was going to have to deal with the consequences from her boss, as I said earlier. So based off that first simple model, I kind of went through with her over the overall impact, what decision she really would have made for if she's having to look at it in the perspective of everybody. And when we came down to it, she said that she would still continue to make the same decision, which was not cooking the books and sticking to the truth, just because she thought that the consequences just weren't enough. Just there was never really in her interest to lie and put her career in jeopardy. And also for the company as too. I mean, I think you're putting your company in a situation that's not well. So she decided she still would have done the same thing. On the second, as we continue the next part, I had to identify some obligations, and she had obligations to her work, obviously, as she was the accountant here for prior 2 years. So she obviously had some obligations to her work, but this didn't change the fact that just because she had obligations didn't mean she was just going to lie and change numbers to benefit the owner of the company. So although there were obligations, this didn't change her decision making, whether or not she was going to lie or change the numbers. And like when we were going over what people of integrity or a moral community would advise, we definitely agreed that people would agree to not cook the books or change numbers just because of the consequences that not only the company could face, but my mom as the accountant who's in charge of all these numbers could face. So based off these third simple model, my mom still said that based off integrity and her virtue as a person, she still would not have changed the numbers or anything. She said she was sticking to the truth just because the consequences were nowhere near. She was going to have to deal with her boss, but that's just a moral. That was just a moral decision that she said she was a lot more comfortable making, especially because she was putting herself in jeopardy, and by lying, it was just going to put more problems and issues on her plate in the future. So when we looked for possible alternatives, when the choice was being made, maybe a creative alternatives, my mom says she did try to explore some scenarios that were not, other scenarios, just to see if maybe she can get around this and possibly make it not as bad, but make it less of a tax return. And she says she spoke with ex-colleagues that she had worked with for 20 years previously, and everyone just was advising her that she should not change numbers, financial numbers in any way, as this obviously could implicate her in IRS fraud and ruin her reputation just as an accountant, and just came with so much more than just changing numbers. It came with a lot more than that. So my mom said ultimately that the decision was made that she still was not going to change any numbers. The last step of the 8-step model was to ultimately check your gut, because I definitely feel that your gut tells you when something's kind of wrong. I mean, we've been living here for me personally, 21 years plus. So you definitely get a weird feeling in your stomach, just in your body, when something doesn't feel right, a decision doesn't feel right. And my mom definitely said that from the start, when the boss brought up changing numbers for, tax benefits, that she already had that weird feeling that just was such a weird and off thing to do. So she said, like, from the get-go, whenever this was brought up, she always had that weird feeling in her gut. So I definitely feel like her gut definitely was telling her something. And she said that from the get-go, even with her gut not telling her anything, that she knew what the moral and ethical decision was to make. So at the end of the 8-step model, me and my mom came to the conclusion that she still would have stuck with the same decision, but it definitely did make her think about things that she didn't think about when this was occurring, such as who was being affected by the decision being made, who were the stakeholders in this decision, who would be going to be affected if she did this decision, and who was going to be affected if she cooked the books. So it kind of made her think of the different situations and scenarios that could have gone down if she had not done this, you know? So I think it was definitely eye-opening for me as well, but also for her as she was able to go through the steps and go through the decision-making process a second time and see, like, well, like would I have done anything different? And in this scenario, no, she would have not. But I also think this was a decision that if you're have morals and can identify what the consequences are based off this decision, it's not the hardest decision to make either. So yeah, this is my final project video. Thank you for listening. And I'm Joshua Escobar also. Thank you.